Secret the Mimic is finally here, and after basically playing the game for 2 days straight, I'm finally ready to talk about what the heck happened. For this video, we're going to go through the entire story of Secret the Mimic from front to back with some small speculations on details that we see along the way, and when we get to the very end, we'll do some larger speculating about the game. You could even say maybe theorizing. If you manage to click on this video and you don't want any spoilers, just put me in your watch later folder and get back to me after you've played the game, because we are going into spoiler territory, heavily. Immediately upon entering the game, we learn the main character's name, and unlike what most people thought, including myself, we're not playing as a character that we already know in the series. We're playing as a new character named Arnold. Arnold says that he's coming off of a 36-hour shift before the dispatch team, voiced by Andy Field, tells him that he has one more task for him to do before he can call it quits. He needs to head over to the Murray's costume manor in order to retrieve something for Fazbear Entertainment. And the only reason that Arnold seems to be doing this in the first place is that he's afraid that Fazbear Entertainment is going to repo his van, so he reluctantly agrees to do the job for them. Upon arriving, we find that the factory seems to be completely abandoned, and the dispatch team even tells us that, but there does seem to be a house on the hill with its lights on. There's just no way for us to access it at the moment. There is, however, a van parked in the parking lot that looks suspiciously like our van. And after getting into the factory and learning a little bit about how our data diver works and turning on the power to this portion of the factory, we actually find one of the people from this van stuffed into a mascot suit. Now that sounds a whole lot like the whole Team A, Team B situation that we got in the Tales story, The Mimic. And while yes, there are details from this story that seem to line up pretty well with the game, I don't want to use this book as a crutch because, as we're going to find out later, this book is not an exact one-to-one, and I don't think I was expecting it to be. In fact, I expected there to be a few details changed, but there are some pretty big details that are changed between this book and the game that we got. So much so that most people are saying that Tales Games is dead. Now that the power's on, the game gives us a quick tutorial on how the inventory system works, and I promise this is important because this is how all your collectibles are going to be stored. And it's not like Security Breach or Ruin where it just goes into a menu that you can access at all times. When you find something, you need to physically put it into a machine in order to save it into your inventory. And you only have two hands. One of them is always holding the data diver, and one of them is able to pick things up, but only one thing at a time. So if you find something, you need to put it into that machine as quickly as possible, or else you could lose it. We also hear a few interesting voice lines from Dispatch while we're learning about the inventory system. Earlier in the game, Dispatch tells us that we're there to collect Fazbear Entertainment property as per Edwin Murray's contract. Anything that he was working on for Fazbear Entertainment, even if it's not finished, is still their property, and that is what we are there to collect. And they do know that the Mimic exists, and it is a danger to a lot of people, and they are trying to work on ways to neutralize it. But then in this recording, when we're actually learning about the inventory system, he says that we're there to collect the Mimic schematics, which are in Edwin Murray's office. And if we can deactivate the Mimic in order to also collect that for Fazbear Entertainment. These two voice lines to me sound contradictory, which is very interesting to me. We're then given the task to upgrade our data diver because every time we upgrade it, we get more access to the building, and eventually we'll get executive access, which will give us the ability to enter Edwin Murray's office where the schematics are. This is then where we get to meet Jackie for like 5 minutes. She's not in the game for very long, which is weird because she's on all of the promotion material, but whatever. After getting chased by Jackie, we then get crashed back into the security office that we start in, where we talk to Dispatch, but Dispatch has a little bit of a communication error at the very beginning. There's a lot of static, which is interesting when we're dealing with the Mimic, who, well, can mimic people. We then encounter our very first helpful robot around the factory, which we find out later is actually voiced by Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. This is important because we later find out that all the Mr. and Mrs. Helpful machines across the factory are all just recordings of Fiona and Edwin, and they do have a good bit of lore behind them if you go to sections that you don't normally listen to. So after listening to Mrs. Helpful and fixing the elevator, we make our way towards Big Top Showroom, where we meet the new Music Man. And we play a few games with him, almost die a few times, you know, the normal, and then we get the upgrade to our data diver that we need. Speaking of upgrade, you should definitely upgrade the subscribe button by clicking on it. that's what we do as YouTubers, right? We say stupid things in order to get people to hit the subscribe. Just hit the subscribe button, please. With our new creator access, we're now able to go into the theater and, more importantly, the workshop, because we're able to actually build a Springlock suit. Not just build it, mind you, we get into the Springlock suit. That's right, Edwin Murray was building Springlock suits, something that we thought only Henry or William were doing, and now all of a sudden, Edwin is building them. He has an entire portion of his factory dedicated to building Springlock suits. We then build ourselves a Springlock suit in order to go through the demonstration of how one of these theater plays might work with a singular person running it. And this is where we actually get to see Foxy the Pirate, one of the first designs of him, because he's not an animatronic here. He's a puppet. After the play ends, the theater starts collapsing in on itself, including the balcony that we are standing on. But luckily, the Springlocks don't manage to go off while we're inside the suit. And we're saved by Dolly from the wreckage. She's there to try and protect us. Scratch that, she's there to protect the suit and try and fix anything that's wrong with it, including the foreign object that's stuck inside us. We also, strangely, in this part of the game, learned that Edwin Murray created recycling. I don't know if that's lore relevant or anything, but that's just strange for me to think about, that Edwin Murray creates recycling in this universe. After running away from Dolly for a little bit, we get probably the best scene I've seen in FNAF ever. Like, we managed to push Dolly into a giant vat of molten metal, and then she emerges from that vat by basically punching her way through and coming out molten and melting in order to continue chasing us with probably the best music I've heard in FNAF ever. And that says a lot because FNAF music goes hard. After escaping from Dolly, we managed to make it back to the security office, speak to Dispatch, who tells us that we can make our way towards the admin wing, which will give us direct access to Edwin Murray's office. But along the way, we meet up with a familiar character, Chica. Now, why exactly does that matter? Well, it's because a certain story that we were talking about earlier that, like I said, is not an exact one-to-one, does give us that detail, that Chica was the first costume to be finished at Murray's Manor. And I needed to point out that it's not an exact one-to-one because in this book, it is said that Edwin makes Chica, but in the game, we later find out that Fiona is the one to design Chica. She designed all the FNAF characters. And it's also important to note that Chica wasn't made for a Freddy's location. She was made for Chica's party world. That thing that was teased way back in Sister Location is now coming back, and it's older than Freddy's is. It's also important to note that Fiona's death happens after the Fazbear Entertainment contracts start. She's talking about the Fazbear Entertainment contracts in one of the Mrs. Helpful machines, and then we hear Edwin talking about those contracts still not finished after she's already gone. So she was around designing the animatronics before she died. After making your way what is currently the hardest part of the game, like seriously, why is Chica so hard? Why can she spot you from a mile away and just get to you in 0.2 seconds from across the map? It's crazy. Everyone I know hates this part of the game. Sorry. Tangent aside, once you get past this very difficult part of the game, you then enter Edwin Murray's office, where you can find two very interesting things. One, Edwin Murray is broke. He is in debt. Two, he has a strange surveillance room that is attached to his office that is hiding behind a bookshelf. You then have to escape through a secret escape hatch that has to open after you close the door behind you because Chica made her way into Edwin Murray's office. You then have to traverse this dark labyrinth down in the basement and try and run away from a tiger rock animatronic that might not even be real because it just keeps poofing in and out of existence. And then you make your way back to the security office and you have the option between two different endings here. The simplest one is talk to Dispatch and give away the data diver. And then you get to leave the factory. Except you weren't talking to Dispatch there. You haven't been talking to Dispatch all night. you've been talking to the Mimic, and it only occurs to you once you get back into your van and you talk to the real dispatch who says, we've been trying to contact you all night. And then you turn around in the back of your van and find the Mimic. The other ending, the parachute ending, is where you don't give dispatch your data diver and instead you activate parachute.exe on the terminal in front of you, which opens a secret hatch in the office, allowing you to escape down into a secret underground facility. You guys are gonna think that I'm insane if you haven't played up to this part of the game, but there is a prototype Freddy's establishment underneath MCM. Apparently, Edwin was building a fake pizzeria in order to test his new prototype animatronics, which doesn't seem correct because some of the recordings imply that he didn't change any of the designs that Fiona made, and we know that she made the Chica that we faced earlier in the game. But there are prototype Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica down here that look like early versions of FNAF 1 characters. If you thought that was crazy, it gets crazier. In order to get to the security office, you need to do a puzzle where you get into Springlock suits and use them in order to drain the power. You find 4 Springlock suits down here. You can find Monty, you can find Bubba, and you can find prototype Spring Bonnie and prototype Fredbear. And when you finally do get to the security office, you find a Mexis machine. Not the one that we find in Ruin, mind you. This one is titled Fiona, because Edwin managed to create a mimic program for his dead wife. We then travel using a secret underground roller coaster that takes us into Edwin Murray's house. That thing that we saw at the very beginning of the game sitting atop that hill really far away, yeah, we travel to that at the end of the game. And while in Edwin Murray's house, you are required to try and get into his home office. But it's locked with a passcode, and the code is found through the home videos that are scattered throughout the house. Each tape has one number at the very end of it. And taking those tapes and putting them in sequential order gets you the code to the door. But through these tapes, we find out a lot about Edwin Murray's life. We find out through these tapes that apparently Fiona dies before David's 3rd birthday. But then you continue watching the tapes and you find out that, well, you're still hearing Fiona's voice. So maybe we just have the order of tapes wrong, but that can't be because they're starting to talk about David's 4th birthday. So why are we hearing Fiona's voice? We are dealing with FNAF where people do come back from death pretty easily, but this just doesn't seem right. We're not dealing with any William Afton characters that should know about the afterlife at this point, right? And then we find out through the final tape that apparently Edwin Murray takes his wife's mimic consciousness that he made and he puts it into the mimic animatronic. That way he can have some assistance with taking care of David and things around the house, but he's been living with this animatronic and acting as if it's Fiona for quite some time now. Also in that last tape, we see a room that is decorated for David's 4th birthday, the birthday that he never makes it to. What's interesting though is you can find this room in the game. Back in that really hard Chica section, if you can manage to get into that room by solving the door puzzle, you can find the birthday setup because it was never cleaned up. No one was allowed into that room after the incident, so no one cleaned it up. The cake is still there, uncut and molding from age. You then finally make your way into Edwin's office using that code, and you find out he's dead. He's been dead for a while. He died to the Mimic. Not directly. It's not like the Mimic stabbed him or anything, but he did kill him indirectly. Some accident happened in the office, causing what seems like debris to fall onto Edwin, trapping him under the debris, and the Mimic ignored him, gave him excuses, similar excuses that Edwin gave to David when he was alive. Like, oh, don't worry about it, sport. Go ask your mom for some help. Maybe we'll play tomorrow. And he leaves him there to die.
M2, respond. Emergency. Call for help.
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
I thought he sounded robotic.
Please. I can't move. I can't feel my legs.
And on Edwin's computer, we find two redacted files that I believe we were originally sent for before the Mimic overrides Dispatch's messages. These two files are called Alternate Fazbear Designs and Puppet Designs, but because they're redacted, we can't see them. And we finally figure out what MEXIS stands for. It stands for Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage. I don't know what X-Form means, and I don't think anybody does, except for maybe Scott. But what is important is that this is tied to the Cradle.exe program that we have to run on this computer. Whatever Cradle is, it's tied to MEXIS. And finally, in order to end this ending, we run away from the Mimic and these little mini Mimics that are also chasing us and run through a fire with a carousel in it in order to get to our van, which is covered in these mini Mimics and the Mimic, who then crashes through our windshield in order to crash the van. And the final scene in this ending is us seeing the Mimic approaching us after the crash, lifting up the car with us still trapped inside, and just grabbing the data diver and walking away. But the game doesn't stop there, because after you get this ending, you can then start New Game Plus, where you get one last collectible. I told you those collectibles were important because you need all 25 collectibles in your machine in order to do this ending. So you need to play through moon.exe, which requires you to collect all the collectibles in the game, and once you get to the end, you get what's called glitch permissions. So once you then go back through the parachute ending and make your way to Edwin Murray's house, you are able to open doors that were not available to you before. Now, why exactly would we need all the items for this ending? It's because each item is tied to David in some way, and Fiona, the program, is trying to take all these items and combine them into a new update for the M2 Mimic in order to fix her son. So after collecting these weird tapes and putting all 6 into this weird wall machine that we have here, you then get access to a vent that leads you into a new room in the house, David's room. Taking the Tiger Rock plush and placing it on top of the podium activates the final boss fight. It's not really a fight, but you know, it's the final part of the game. After doing that, you start hearing the story time that you just put into those wall machines, which is directed towards the Mimic. So after putting in the correct code into the weird book with buttons thing that's sitting in front of us, the Mimic freezes in front of you and has its chest open, which allows you to put your data diver in, which uploads your permissions into the Mimic, which then fixes the Mimic apparently and causes it to revert back into a David mindset rather than flip-flopping like it was during that final fight scene where it's going back and forth between David and a bloodthirsty killer. Now, that's the end of the game, but it's not the end of the story, because there's an entire part of this story that is being told to us through environmental storytelling, through voice recordings that we hear throughout the game, through the mail that we get. And it all starts way back before Edwin even meets Fiona. We learned that apparently Edwin's father used to own the MCM company, and sometime while his father was still alive, Edwin meets Fiona, and I think it's implied that they meet on the job, and afterwards they keep collaborating until they eventually start dating and then get married. After Edwin's father passes, Edwin then takes up the mantle as the CEO of MCM. And it seems like he doesn't really know what he's doing at the very beginning. He's taking the company in way too many directions at once. So much so that Fiona has to sit him down and say, you can run the company however you want, but you need to choose one path. You can't just do everything at once. And it seems like from this point, Edwin and Fiona work together in order to create things. Fiona's more the creative type, so she makes things like the costumes and the puppets and the designs and things like that, while Edwin is more of the mechanical guy. He creates all the machines that we see around the factory, the animatronics, the Mimic program. Edwin and Fiona then have David, but Edwin's not exactly the best parent. At a young age, he's scaring David with that Foxy plush as we see, and we see that as he's getting older, he's not really paying attention to David, he's neglecting him and burying himself in his own work. And because of this, later whenever David and even Fiona die, he's very regretful of his decisions up to that point. Fiona then leaves a message for Edwin saying that she's headed to the Fall Fest in order to help them with whatever project that they're working on. But I don't think she ever comes back from this. I think this is how she dies. She dies in the Fall Fest fire that we've been hearing about for years now, and it puts Edwin into a deep depression. Using the old Fall Fest posters that we have and the stock chart that we can find in the game, I think we can get an estimate as to when the Fall Fest fire happens. And I think since the chart is showing that it goes up to 1975 and there's a big dip a few years earlier, we can safely say that the Fall Fest fire, the year that Fiona dies, is 1970. And it kind of seems like that without Fiona, the creative department absolutely plummeted into itself. Even before she died, it seemed to be struggling a little bit because there's a voice message where she was saying, "Oh yeah, every idea is worth pursuing," and then immediately followed up by, "Yeah, maybe not every idea is worth pursuing," which leads me to the idea that the creative department was kind of struggling even before her death, and after her death, they kind of just fell apart. Which it makes sense that if a company that is very creatively based, trying to make costumes and characters for other companies, it makes sense that if your creative department just kind of disappears overnight, that your entire company is going to suffer because of it. After a little bit, Edwin then decides that he's going to build the Mimic in order to help take care of David. And after a little bit, it kind of seems like that Edwin reprograms the Mimic in order to act like Fiona. Either that or Fiona literally possesses the program that the Mimic is running on. Edwin, David, and the Fiona robot seem to make it work for a while until eventually David also dies. Specifically not from a car, because we see the David playground whenever we first walk into the MCM facility, and it's fenced off completely. So I'm not 100% sure what killed David, but I have a few ideas. In Moon.exe, we see that Fiona is represented by the sun, and we even see that whenever we actually see Fiona whenever we go down into that prototype Freddy's location. And Moon seems to be representing Edwin in this scenario. So whenever we put on that owl mask and the moon starts crying, I think the owl is supposed to represent David, at least before he died, because afterwards we then recreate David as Eclipse. The whole game to me feels like it's Fiona, David, and Edwin all being represented in different ways, and Fiona, the sun character, kills the owl, David, and then tries to recreate him using the Mimic. I don't understand why she would want to do that, but that seems like the outcome that we're supposed to get from this game. Anyway, now that Edwin is alone, he's kind of going a little bit crazy, but he's not completely in the wrong for going crazy. There's somebody in his company who is leaking information to one of his biggest competitors, to Fazbear Entertainment. They're getting all of his secrets, including one big one. The one that he was trying to make sure no one knew about, the Mimic. So Edwin pulls a Willy Wonka and everyone either leaves of their own accord in order to join Fazbear Entertainment, or he fires everyone. And that leaves him all to his lonesome, except for his animatronics. Edwin then tries to bring back David using his Mimic technology, similar to what he did with Fiona, but this one doesn't work as well. Something happens that makes the Mimic not as successful as Fiona was. And I think that thing is that he's very rageful and misses his actual family and throws that rage at his pretend family, and they learn from that rage. This causes him to then shelve the M2 Mimic idea for now, and Fiona's not too thrilled with that. She wants her son back. It might not be her real flesh and blood, but she's also not real flesh and blood, so it doesn't matter to her. She just wants David back and keeps pestering Edwin until eventually he locks her consciousness in the Nexus machine. This causes Edwin to be completely and utterly alone. He has no friends left. He has no employees to talk to. He doesn't have any family. He locked his mechanical wife in a box. So he gets a little desperate, and it seems like he starts working on the M2 project again, because by the end of his life, he is speaking to M2 in order to save him, because he was working on some sort of experimental energy, and M2 lets him die. And since Edwin was the last person in his house and factory, no one knew that Edwin died. I mean, Fazbear Entertainment sure thinks that he's still alive, trying to finish their project. And even Fiona, his mechanical wife that he locked in a box in the basement, thinks that he's alive, just ignoring her. So after his death, the bills just keep piling up until eventually Fazbear Entertainment just starts sending people in order to try and reclaim their belongings, which eventually leads to the beginning of Secret of the Mimic. Speaking of the title of the game, what exactly was the Secret of the Mimic? Well, I kind of went into this expecting there to be multiple answers, similar to how Sister Location has that double meaning of that being a Fazbear Entertainment owned company, as well as it being the location where Mike's sister is. I expected Secret of the Mimic to have a double meaning as well, and I was not disappointed. The first and very obvious answer of what the secret was is, well, it's the Mimic itself. In universe, Edwin was trying to keep the Mimic project pretty hush-hush, and even less people were supposed to know about M2. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to just be Edwin and David who knew, and then all of a sudden, whenever people started jumping ship over to Fazbear Entertainment, they started leaking all of his company secrets, including the Mimic and M2. The second less obvious answer, and the one that I feel like you're more interested in, is what we talked about earlier, how Fiona seems to kill her own son. I really don't see a motive for her doing this, but Moon.exe seems to imply it, with the sun killing the owl, and Sun representing Fiona and David representing the owl, and the fact that his playground is surrounded by a fence. And in the books, he's killed by a car. But if he's surrounded by a fence when he's on the playground, the car can't get to him. So it leaves up to question what killed David. It would also give Edwin a little bit more motivation for taking Fiona's consciousness and locking it in the Nexus machine. If Fiona is the one to kill their son, then he can't trust her anymore and decides to put her in a machine. And then whenever he tries to recreate David, it doesn't work out because he still doesn't have that trust for the Mimic program. And with that, I'm gonna leave this video here. What did you guys think? Did you guys play Secret of the Mimic? I really enjoyed it, except for a few parts. Mainly that Chica part. That part sucked. It was too long. I wanted all of the mail from that room, and she just was too fast in order to try and escape from. Anyways, let me know what you guys think of Secret of the Mimic, and if it's absolutely shattering the FNAF timeline, because I'm seeing a lot of theories already come out that are breaking all of FNAF. Also, let me know what you guys think of the Secret of the Mimic is. I think my interpretation is pretty good right now, but I also know that there's a lot of mysteries surrounding MCM. Like, there's so many whiteboards with numbers on them that just don't have any meaning to us right now. We need to figure out what that means, and it's going to drive me crazy for a little bit. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!